National intelligence is going to have to answer for why they didn't do their job either.
And one of the other things that's come up, and Jeff, I want to throw this to you because, as we mentioned, you've also sort of made a career out of pointing out some of the issues, some of the many issues and inadequacies with airport security. We look at how many people knew about this. Fran touched on all of them. We know the dots weren't connected there. But the fact that this guy was still able to get on a plane, when you look at security in a post 9/11 world, are we any safer in the skies or in the airports than we were on September 10th, 2001?
Well, you know what I always tell people is that it's still safer to fly than drive. That's true. But you know what I hope for is that one day the American government will actually level with us and say, you know what? It's not entirely safe to fly. It's not entirely safe to do anything in this environment. I think that as a general proposition, my rule is that if the terrorist makes it to the airport, it's probably too late to stop him. That's why, I mean, talking to Fran, you know, that's why the intelligence work and the military work and the law enforcement work is so important. Because if these guys make it to the airport, everybody who's been to an airport knows the TSA is a somewhat flawed model. You know, you can't really count on the system that's been built to stop these terrorists to actually stop them.
Fran, when you listen to some things, I just want to move on to what happens next here. Barbara Starr talking about the possibility of retaliatory strikes in Yemen. How much broader do you think the war on al-Qaeda could get at this point? And is this the best way to go about it, by moving on to retaliatory strikes?
Eric, I wrote an op-ed piece in the Washington Post today on this very point. I will tell you, while we ought to move cautiously, we have tried about everything one can try in terms of trying to convince the Yemeni government to build its own capability to take on these threats because they are self-interested. We've given them economic aid and civil aid and soft power, and we've tried it all. And so there's going to come a point where they're not just a threat only to the United States, but as we've heard earlier, there was a threat, an assassination attempt against the head of Saudi security that failed, but that also emanated out of Yemen. Our consulate in Jeddah was attacked several years ago, guns coming from Yemen. And we've seen repeated threats both to the United States and to our allies in the region. And so we're going to have to act with those allies to try and deal with this problem.
Jeff, though, in your research that you've done and the stories that you've covered, is the U.S. prepared to broaden this war to this point, this war on terror, and to be able to support that?
That's the biggest question of all. But it's very important to remember we've been engaged in these operations in Yemen since 2002. It might be new to a lot of people around the world, but the American government has certainly been engaged. But yes, you ask an excellent question. Are the American people, are the Democrats in Congress right now ready to say, in addition to what we're doing in Iraq, in addition to ramping up in Afghanistan, in addition to all of the complicated work that needs to be done in Pakistan, are we ready to ramp up in Yemen as well? We might have to be ready to ramp up in Yemen as well, but it's an open question to me whether we have the will and the fortitude to try it at this point.
And actually saying it out loud, too, of course, does change the game just a little bit. Jeffrey Goldberg, Fran Townsend, appreciate your insight. Thank you both.